love Dark Souls and Souls-like games and always wish that you could replicate that feel within a TTRPG? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about on today's episode of the RPG Goblin, a Souls-like game that is a solo TTRPG called Rune, and it is an absolutely fantastic game. I bring on my friend Ashe, who is an avid lover of Souls-like games, and we just talk about it. Neither of us had much experience playing the game before we ended up talking about it, but the conversation was still fantastic, and I would 100% recommend it. Rune is published by Gila RPG, and I really recommend you check it out if you really think the game is cool within this episode. So, let's get into it. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about, this is going to be a bit of a different episode, as I am bringing on my great friend Ashe, and we are going to be talking about RPGs that are based off of Souls games. So things like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, games like that. If you would, very quickly though, Ashe, like to introduce yourself to the people listening.
Hi, I'm Ashe. I'm a good friend of Willow's. We've known each other for quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
I was one of their, not their first DM, but I was their first homebrew DM.
Yes, you were, and I think first you were my first actual like private campaign as well. When I was just playing public games before that.
Yep. So, I have a immense love for Souls-like games, and once we were actually chatting about Souls-like tabletop RPGs, and how I feel like there's not a really good big popular one. However, with some digging, Willow has introduced me to this little TTRPG called Rune. And I bought it last night, spent most of my night reading over the rules, and I absolutely love everything about it. So,
Yes.
yeah.
I haven't read it yet, but just from what Ash has been saying, I'm very, very excited to learn to like be able to hear him talk about it and to actually get it myself at some point when I lift the ban off of me not getting any more RPGs, or at least buying any more RPGs. But yeah, so I would love if you would, very quick, before we get into talking more about the RPG side of like the Souls game, the Souls game RPG you have, would you like to introduce exactly what Souls games are?
So, it's kind of hard to specifically pin down exactly what Souls games are, but they're typically generalized and categorized as games with difficult but rewarding combat. Typically, you are also a nobody character who obtains a great level of power through just sheer will and determination, and there's also a big theme of never giving up and a cycle of death and rebirth and overcoming great obstacles.
Yes. I love that so much. And a big part of Souls games is dying.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely. That is a big that is a big part of it.
it happens a lot. And especially if you don't know quite what you're doing, like at least like for Souls video games, if you don't know what you're doing yet, you are going to probably die all the time, very consistently, just going to keep resetting yourself and all of that, and it can be very frustrating. But I believe like Soul games though give you such a reward. Like, you know, you beat this huge boss that killed you 10 times and you finally beat it and it's like, yes, I did it. And it's so much like a lot of death and a lot of frustration for a lot of award because you finally are able to beat the big boss and go further into the game and all of that. So
Oh, yeah, I couldn't have described it better myself, because that is exactly that feeling you get of overcoming a challenging obstacle.
mhm.
Um, is
Like I
is
finally did it.
I finally did it. I finally beat that boss. Um, However, I'm also going to say one little hot take, which is when it comes to Souls games, don't be intimidated by the community. Play however you want to play. If that means you just simply have hit a wall with a boss, you can't beat it on your own. Don't be afraid to reach out to the community or get a co-op partner. So that's my little hot take and piece of advice if you're ever wanting to start any Souls-like games is play how you want to play it in a way that is fun for you.
Yeah, and you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to do it alone. There is a whole like the internet is out there, and people have made videos on how to beat bosses and stuff like that. And there's no shame with looking that up. We love
Oh,
that.
absolutely, absolutely not. I've probably out of all the Souls games, I probably have put most of my time into Dark Souls 3. And let me tell you, there are certain bosses that I just, no matter what kind of a style of play I'm going for, there are certain bosses that I just can't beat without cooperation or without summoning other players.
Hmm.
So
Crazy.
there's no shame in that game. Don't let anybody bully you into basically saying that like, oh, you didn't beat the game at soul level 1 completely naked with your fists only, and you never got hit once. You're not truly a Souls player. Don't let people bully you into thinking that's the right way to play the game. There is no right way to play these games. There's just having fun.
Exactly. Like you are playing games to have fun, and that extends to TTRPGs as well. You aren't playing, there's no right way to play. There's no, people will always have their preferred ways and will sometimes even say, like, oh, you're not actually playing the game unless you play it like this. But guess what? It doesn't matter because the best, like, the most important part is that you are having fun and enjoying the game. If you only follow like half the amount of rules that are in the RPG itself, who cares? You are still having fun. You don't need to follow every rule and do it exactly right to have the fun in the game. So just vibe. Just have a good time.
Yes, I I I think that is the most important rule, whether it's tabletop RPGs or video games, which is just have fun.
Yeah. You don't have to play it on ultra hard mode and cry. It's okay. Unless that's how you enjoy yourself.
I was about to
But
say, unless of course that is how you enjoy your games, in which case go for it.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
that is not how I enjoy my games, even though I am a huge Souls player. But I am of the hot take opinion that Souls games are not necessarily hard; they're just strict.
Yeah, and so my next question, because I haven't read the RPG yet, how well does Rune actually translate be like the strict environment of a Souls game?
So, uh, and I'll be referencing the sheet since I have it in front of me.
Mhm.
Um, so how well it does that is it has number one, it has a clock system. There's a day and night cycle, but there's also like environmental systems as well, such as um, God, there was one that I was reading here. Let me try and find it. I think it's towards the bottom. Oh, I remember. There was like a realm where there's a high tide and a low tide system, and depending on whether it's high tide or low tide, it might affect the enemies that are at certain locations, or it might affect your ability to get to one place or another.
Interesting.
At Yeah, and as for everything else, um, kind of that nature of how it adapts the feeling of being in a Souls-like game is really, really on point. Um, because number one, a big thing about Souls games is you die and you respawn at a spawn point, essentially, whether that be
Mhm.
a bonfire or site of grace, or in this game, it's called a sigil. From what I've noticed, or from what I've read and seen, you're not actually going to be fighting like dozens and dozens of enemies. Instead, the game, when you're engaging in combat, you're going to be fighting a smaller group of enemies, but everything is much more limited. Your health pool is limited, their health pool is limited, healing is very limited, and overall, like, you could very easily die at any point.
The stakes are high.
The stakes for combat are very high, which is very interesting because I actually really dig this game's combat mechanics. Because, so for those of you who are unfamiliar with this is actually a solo player tabletop RPG.
Yes, solo RPG is always fun.
So there's no DM, there's no game master. Every decision that is made, whether it be enemy movement and what the enemies are going to do, is completely on the player as well. You can be a little bit more forgiving in that sense, but the game does have very specific rules in it, such as, like, if an enemy's range says that it has to be either in the same space or in the adjacent space, then they're going to move to that range. Whereas if an enemy has a range of 2 blocks or 3 blocks, they will typically stay 2 to 3 blocks away from you.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of built-in structure in that sense, but you can obviously, like, move the enemies around. That would be a little bit more advantageous for you as a player. So there is a little bit of forgiveness with it, but not much.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely feel like out of any kind of game that's going to be a solo RPG, definitely a Souls-like feels right. Because it is just you. You don't have a whole party of people. It's just you fighting against all these ruthless enemies and hoping not to die. So I'm curious. So that's sort of how it's kind of the basic of how the game sets the environment and everything. How does the character creation work within that game?
So it's kind of interesting. So every character starts off the same. It's here. I have to scroll down to the bottom. Where is it? Getting started and beyond. So the player characters are known as the engraved. Basically, in this game, you go around killing bosses and taking their runes, and their runes have special effects, things like that. But as for how characters start, it says right here, every engraved has the same starting stats, which is 10 health, 2 stamina, 0 lore. And to kind of explain how health is pretty standard, enemies do damage, subtract that. But what stamina is it is a number of d6. So in this case, because I have a stamina of 2, that is 2d6.
Interesting.
So what you do for your stamina is you, at the start of your part of combat, because enemy movements and actions go first. They always go first.
Of course.
of course. Player actions go second. So what you do is first you roll the actions of the enemies on a d6. It's 1d6 per enemy. At least if I'm interpreting the rules correctly, it is 1d6 per enemy. And for you, it is how much stamina you have, which in this case is 2. So you would roll 2d6.
And those are like essentially the attacks against each other, are the d6s?
So you have essentially every item in the game has a stat sheet, essentially. So right here, I'm looking at a longsword. If I roll a 2 on a stamina die, it allows me to do 1 harm, which is 1 damage. If I roll between a 3 and a 5, I can move 1 space and do 2 harm. If I roll a 6, I can move 1 space and do 3 damage.
Ooh, interesting. Okay, yeah. And
Um,
so
oh,
if you
oh,
are
I should.
rolling this, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, so just as a quick heads up, by the way, combat takes place on a 4x4 grid. So A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you move, you can only move either up or up, down, left, or right. You cannot move diagonally.
Okay, interesting.
So what were you going to say?
Um, for the dice, so essentially how it seems like the stamina is sort of like a dice pool, and you are rolling all of that for your, so let's say you are attacking with a longsword. You would be rolling both your stamina dice for that longsword, correct?
So the way that it works is you can have multiple items in your hand, one for each hand.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I roll 2d6. Uh and I roll a 5 on one and a 2 on another. And let's say I have a shield in the other hand and a long sword, just plain old good old simple sword and board.
Of course.
Of course, the good old paladin standard. Um Now, I could take the 2 and apply that to the long sword or the shield. Now, if I were to apply a 2 to the long sword, that would allow me to do 1 damage. And if I took the 5 and applied it to my shield, then I could move 1 space and block 2 damage.
Okay.
Um, so you can kind of take these pool of dice that you roll and apply it to either one item or an item in both hands. Because it's not because some items actually go above a 6 in
Mm-hmm.
terms of what you want. So you can actually combine your stamina dice to get a higher number.
Okay,
Let's
that's super interesting, actually.
Yes. So let me see. There's an example up further. Scroll. Okay, so if you have a weapon that has the versatile trait, which basically means you can either wield it one hand or two handed, if you wield it two handed, the stats on that are this. You can, between a 5 and a 6, you can harm or do 3 damage and do a special move known as a cleave.
Mm-hmm.
7 is harm 4, cleave, and then 8 or higher is move 1, do 4 damage and cleave.
Crazy. So essentially, you just spent like you have to spend more of the dice, which means you would probably be able to do less if you have another item, but you get much more powerful strikes or attacks or bonuses if it's like a shield, being able to block more and stuff like that. Very
Absolutely,
interesting.
absolutely. So another big thing for Souls games that is very important is normally in the video game you have an actual stamina bar that every
Mhm.
action takes a little bit of that stamina bar away, which creates a video game version of what would essentially be, in tabletop terms, action economy.
Yes.
Uh, so I think this game does a very good job of um, initiating action economy and puts a real heavy emphasis on action economy, which is, you know, do I put more dice into my weapon for a better strike and possibly kill one of these enemies, thus eliminating the threat at all cost? Or do I take a little bit more of a defensive approach where I split my dice into both a shield or a weapon or a different weapon or whatever and take less damage but also deal less damage?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of risk and reward to how you play.
Yeah, a lot of it's just also based on however you want like your play style for the game, if you want to be more defensive or if you want to be more aggressive. Something I am curious about, because I believe when we were talking beforehand, you mentioned that you played a magic build in Elden Ring, and I don't know exactly how. I don't know what all types of Souls games that this game, Rune, really covers, but do they have like magic options within this game?
I believe it does, but they're usually in the form of gear. Um, I believe there are spells and ranged options. I haven't read through all the gear options yet.
Hmm.
But there are certain like runes or gear like that can give you bonuses. Like there's this one right here called the Strider Boots, which the criteria for activating its effect is no move from weapons this round. Effect gain +1 movement this round.
Mm.
So there's that, or there's this one called the Red Crown, which is criteria. Enemies in at least two adjacent. You have to have at least enemies in at least two adjacent spaces, and the effect on that is deal +2 harm, but you also take an additional harm this round.
Gotcha. So buffs and drawbacks for all these different kind of items and
Yes,
abilities
exactly.
and stuff like that. Very fun.
Yes,
Ooh,
exactly.
I like that. Okay. So you're when you have a character and obviously you're going through the realm and you're fighting enemies and all of that, do you level up?
So that's the interesting thing is you actually there is no leveling up system. There's
Interesting.
only the there's only the gear that you obtain through exploration and combat, which we haven't touched on exploration yet, but exploration is really interesting in this game.
Yeah, I think honestly, let's talk about that next, as we've kind of covered combat, like as with how you work in combat and stuff like that. I definitely like to know how the enemies work and setting that up. But I'm very curious about exploration, since that is kind of the way to quote unquote level up and get more powerful through the game.
So the way that exploration works is there's a limited you basically visit different realms, and when you buy this game, you get all the realms that are available on it currently. Um, and each realm has a set number of points on it. Um, like let me scroll up to this one. The this one here, known as the Iron Veil, it has a total of 11 points on it that you can explore. Now, typically, when you go to a new realm, the sigil point will typically be number one. And
Hmm.
the way that you explore in this game is there's dotted lines that connect each point, and you can only progress to a different point on the map if it is connected. So, like the way that this one is connected is one is only connected to two, but two is connected to four, three, and nine.
Hmm.
So if I were to progress from one to two, do everything I do at point number two, I could choose to at any point go to point number nine, point number three, point number four. And all of these areas do have names. It's just for map's sake, that's how they're labeled.
Yeah, yeah. And
Um,
yeah, so that makes it, you can just go pretty much anywhere that's connected as long as as long as it's connected, you can go there.
yes. Um, and so there are four actions you can take at any point on the map. First one being fight, which if you are at an area that has enemies, you must take the fight action first. Otherwise, you will not be able to take any of the other actions.
Hmm.
Then you have, let me exit out of this and head back to the other one. Okay. So the actions you can take are, like I said, fight, which is the first one. You have to take if there are enemies there. There's search, um, which is pretty self-explanatory. You search to get items and treasures, um, which can either be equipment or gear or consumables. Um,
Is that for how that's done, is there like random tables for you to roll on or
so because this is a solo adventure, everything's a little bit more pre-planned out. So everything that if you do choose to search, you will, I believe, you do get a predetermined item.
gotcha.
But the interesting thing is that there's also the other options as well, which is there's learn, which is you learn the lore of the land should you choose to learn the
Hmm.
lore. Um, and what that does is that increases your lore score, which um, can open up other opportunities, which means when you search for an item, if you don't have a lore score high enough, you may not be able to find certain items. So
Interesting.
let's say if I'm looking at this predetermined stat sheet and the items listed for search, one of them says you must have a lore score of 2.
Mhm.
Well, if I don't have a lore score of 2, then I don't find that item. Then
That
there
is that's actually a very interesting way to actually make these other mechanics and essentially not the kind of stats, quote unquote stats, work in the game and not like, oh yeah, I can do that. But if you actually want to get some of these items, you have to put levels into these stats to actually be able to find some things that are probably more powerful or very interesting. Plus, you get to actually learn the lore of the area. That's really cool.
Oh yeah, and then there's also what is known as delve. Now, um, delve, as it is quoted here, delve is when you want to get at those precious secrets and valuables.
Ooh.
Um, Now, typically, when you want to delve, there is a requirement for that. That
Hmm.
could be either a minimum lore score, it could be a gauntlet of fights, or a specific world event that has to occur, or a unique item that you found somewhere else in the realm in order to get the reward for delving in this area. So there's a lot
Mm,
of interconnectivity with the exploration for a game that is a solo game.
absolutely. And actually, while you've been talking, I've been curious. So with the realms, obviously, there's probably quite a few in the base game itself,
Mhm.
especially as a solo adventure. Like once you get through one, you can obviously replay it, but it's probably more interesting to play through a new one. While you've been talking, that made me curious, and I actually found that there is a bunch of like third-party content of people making realms for this game that
Oh,
offer like different, probably different items, different information that you can learn about it, all kinds of stuff like that.
I was not aware of this, but that sounds really cool. And the fact that such a smaller RPG has such a dedicated community to create third party content like that is really, really awesome.
Yeah, and I would imagine that even making or designing your own realms would be not necessarily easy, but very fun to do and not super complicated since there doesn't seem to be a lot of there's not a lot of mechanical or system stuff that you have to worry about and make sure, oh, is this balanced and all of that. Like it pretty much comes down to just like the weapons and the story and possibly enemies.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yes. So that's pretty cool. Once I saw that, I'm like, "Oh, I have to mention that because this is really interesting." And it's Rune like Rune, not Ruin.
It is
S-
our Rune.
and it is by Gila, I believe, Gila RPGs.
I believe that is how it's pronounced as well. I don't know. I haven't heard it pronounced, so
Yeah, we're
I'm
gonna we're gonna assume that's how it's said. But you can find them on itch.io where you can buy the digital game and everything. But yeah, this is super interesting. And so with kind of like the lore and the delving and the searching and all of that, kind of have a next question, which is the enemies. So I kind of answered it for myself a little bit when I said enemies earlier. But in the game, there are set enemies for each area, right?
Hmm.
And what are those enemies? Oh,
Not necessarily
go ahead.
for each area, but for predetermined areas, there are going to be enemies.
So not every single area has an enemy.
No,
Okay.
not every area has an enemy.
But they are predetermined of like where they are and what they are.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
like I said before, this is done on a 4x4, um, or combat is done on a 4x4 plane.
Hmm.
So when you buy this game, you get the sheets and everything, and the sheets tell you specifically what is at and what actions are available at a specific point in each realm. So I am currently looking over the first one here, which is the Draco lands, and I'm looking at point number 5. And the options here for point number 5 is fight and learn. And it says right here for fight, terrain, permanent, BC through C2. So what that
Interesting.
means, so there's two different kinds of terrain as well. There's oh god, what? Oh god, I'm trying to think of the word now. Um there's difficult terrain, which you can still, I believe you can still pass through, but it provides disadvantages or something like that.
Hmm.
And then there's permanent terrain. Now, permanent terrain is terrain in the area that which you cannot move through, but at the same time, if you are on the opposite side of a piece of permanent terrain, enemies can't hit you, and they, for range purposes, they don't have line of sight.
Mm.
And when you're setting up these 4x4 grids, um, the the sheet will tell you specifically where to place your enemies. So, like for this one right here, it says enemies Dragon Knight B3. So, and your starting point for combat is also predetermined, and here it says D4.
E4. Okay.
So
And
that's kind
okay.
of how you set up the actual map. Is um, you start with a 4x4 plane, and then the sheets tell you what to fill in with what.
Yeah, and it's one, and like you said earlier, it's 1 through 4 going one way, A through B going the other way, and that's how you figure out exactly where each little guy is going. So if it says B3, it's going is it I'm just curious of this way from across like top from like
Left to
one
right,
end to
left to right, I
yeah.
believe is A through D,
Okay.
and then top to bottom is 1 through 5 or 1 through 4. I believe
One
that's how
through
it's.
four. Yeah, because it would be a 4 by 4, so that would
Yes.
make sense. Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, that's interesting because I'm like kind of doodling a little bit and making like these little grids. And I mean, they're just like they even if I don't know if there's any like ones that are preset or whatever in the book, but they're very easy to just like quickly make as well, which is very convenient. Just be able to make a simple little essentially battlefield for your game and be able to like play it immediately.
So that's actually a really good comment because I believe I read somewhere that there are that this game does come with predetermined. Well, doesn't look like it, but I believe if you get a certain version, like the Patreon or Kickstarter version of this game, I believe you do get access to the like the 4x4 sheet if you wanted to play tabletop versus playing it online.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
So part of the other thing that is really interesting is everything in this game has a little note to it. So, like for
Ooh.
instance, enemies have like a little note of what they're about.
Hmm.
Um, so let's see. The Dragon Knight, which is what I was just talking about in 5, they have a little piece of text on them that gives a little bit of insight into some of the lore of the land without actually having to take the lore or learn action.
Oh,
So
that's
for right
fun.
here, it says Draconic Knight. Sir Harrow scaled the walls of Osel, Alora, and put them to the torch as they slept. And that's just a little excerpt about the enemy you're fighting.
Interesting. Okay, very quick. I don't know if you've played Dead Cells.
I
Um,
have played Dead Cells. I love
you
Dead
have.
Cells.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of those points when you complete an area and you're going to the next one. It'll usually have a little like snippet, give you like a little lore thing about just something random about the area, about like the people, like when everything went bad, all of that. It has like a little snippet that it will show on screen. That reminds me exactly of that.
Oh, absolutely. Um, and so speaking of little snippets, there is a brief description at the beginning of one of the texts of each of the official realms. The
Hmm.
Dracolands, which we've been talking about, its brief description is a terrible ritual spells doom for the Dracolands. Wander a desolate land full of powerful enemies to stop the ritual. So here's an
Ooh.
interesting thing about this game as well, which is you don't have to play this game in any particular order. If you want to start at the hardest area, or what is supposed to be the hardest area, you can just start at the hardest area. You don't have to start at easy and work your way up.
Yeah.
You can play this game in any order that you want.
You can decide to punish yourself immediately.
Yes, exactly. It's not recommended, but you can do it.
Yeah. And I do like that it does have tiers of areas so that you can start at the easiest and then you can start to learn and get a good idea of like what this game is, how it works. And then slowly as you go, you can go into the harder ones. And then maybe even like you get to one point and you're like, well, no, what? I want to challenge myself and immediately do the hard. Like I am 3 in and I want to go to the hardest one already just to see how it is. And then if you fail, you learn something. You learn how that area is. You learn all kinds of things.
So another thing that we kind of briefly touched on, but I kind of want to expand a little bit more, is the clock system.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two different kinds of clocks. Let me pull that up real quick. Okay, so there's two different kinds of clocks. There's the cyclic and singular clocks. Cyclic are things like your day and night cycle, high tide, low tide. These are events that when you fill up the clock, it will change, and then you can fill the clock back up again.
Ooh,
Then there
okay.
then there are singular clocks, which once you fill that up, the realm or area has permanently changed,
Mm-hmm.
or something in the realm has permanently changed.
Oh,
So,
that's cool.
so for instance, we've been talking about the Draco lands. There is a clock for the Draco lands. There's actually um, there's actually four. There's the Draconic Knight, Worm, Dragon, and Realm Breaker clocks,
Those
which all
don't
do
sound terrifying.
yes. Um, and what also is really interesting is each realm has their own unique death penalty.
Ooh.
So when you die in this game, it is not the end of the game, but you do respawn at your sigil point, which is typically point one. If there are any areas that you cleared when you fought through them, those restart. Oh, and I forgot to mention when you take an action at a particular location, once you have marked that location or that action, that is it. So if I went to an area, learn and did the search action at an area, that's it. I can no longer search there again, even if I come back later with more lore learned or a different item or whatever, that is it.
Does that also count that if you die and then go back to that area?
Yes, it is. It is.
Oh, ooh,
It is.
that's
It
oof.
is. It's permanent, but it also adds that level of, again, risk reward, which is, well, hey, I can search and get this item that I would really need right now, or I can wait till I uh, develop a little bit more lore of the land, come back to this area, and then get that item plus something additional. So there's a little bit of additional risk reward.
Yeah, you got the strategy there. You got to actually think about what you want to do and what your game plan's going to be. When you die though, do you have your what all resets when you die?
Um, so the only thing that resets when you die is enemies.
Okay.
Everything else you keep your runes, you keep your items, you keep your consumables. Um, but there are, like I said, there are unique death penalties for every area. So for the Dracolands, it says right here, if you die in the Dracolands, you resurrect at the sigil with full health. In addition, your death energies feed the draconic ritual, marking the current clock once.
Oh no.
So it might be, ticking up a clock, or I know there's one for a different area that I was researching,
Mhm.
and let me go to a different area and compare.
I
Ah,
just want
oh,
to before going to that, I just want to say if anyone has played Blades in the Dark, the clock system reminds me a lot of that, where depending on the event, something happens, it ticks the clock to make it go further to something actually going, like happening. Uh, so if you, let's say, die, you tick a clock and it starts to, uh, you actually start to make progress on it until it actually fully does, and it'll change either permanent effects or short-term effects and stuff like that, which is really cool.
but oh, I remember there was one for like a seafaring area where if you
Ooh.
died once, the next fight you got into, your movement was reduced by one.
Oh no.
And if you died three times, the next fight you got into, your movement would be reduced by two.
Oh, so it's just stacking on. Oh no, that sucks. Oh gosh. Where you
Which
wouldn't even
is, which
no.
again is very in line with how things are done in the Souls series,
Uh-huh.
where things progressively get worse the more you die. But it makes that challenge and rewarding system so much sweeter.
So as someone who is such a big fan of the Souls games, how excited are you to play this game?
Immensely. The only thing is that I wish this game did come with the pre-printed out, or the ability to print out those 4x4 sheets.
Hmm.
And if I had more paper and ink available to me, I would be printing this out and playing it today.
I love that. Actually, I'm gonna look to see if they do have, because oh yeah, they have resources on the itch.io page, which might have those sheets where you can print them out. Why is my thing looking all weird like that? Yeah, okay. Yeah, they actually on the itch.io page, under where essentially you buy the game and download it, there is a thing that gives you resources that lets you be able to print out the map and like the little 4x4 map and other things along with it.
Awesome. Um, so now there's also the ability to travel through these realms at any point. So if you decide, hey, I'm having too hard of a time through the Dracolands, I want to go to a different realm, you can.
Oh, you can just nope right out of there.
Yep. You
Oh
you
my God.
you again, the actions you've already taken in certain areas are permanent, so even if you leave the realm and come back, I believe if I'm reading the rules correctly, you've already taken that action in that area, so you cannot, even if you leave the realm and come back.
Ooh, interesting. Oh, that's very cool. To be able to just travel out. Ooh. And that's even a good way to, if you're like, I'm ready to try something harder or to advance, you can just do that on the spot without having to complete the full area. Very fun.
Yep. So now it is recommended to complete as much of the area as possible because there is a boss in each realm known as the Rune Lord, and you want to get these runes. They provide very special bonuses.
Yeah, I was just wondering that if there were actually like bosses in each area, because I just from my general knowledge of how roguelike slash souls like games like that work, it would be a bunch of smaller enemies that lead up to an actual boss. So that's very cool. Do you want to give an example of what like one of the rune keepers are like? Like what they
So
do?
I was just thinking that you would probably ask me that. Um, so let me see if let me go back to a different one so that way I can scroll down and do a little bit of an easier one.
The more and more I learn about solo RPGs, the more and more I want to play them.
Oh, I am right there with you. Because it's so interesting to play these. The fact that, like, yes, you can't, there is a part where you can give yourself a little break, but everything is so meticulously designed that it's very minor breaks and minor things that you can give yourself.
Hmm.
Okay, so in one of the starter areas, the um, oh,
It's, yeah, sorry.
the area boss is known as the Ruined King, and he has two
Ooh.
phases. So once
Oh
you,
no.
yeah, so once you bring him down for his health on his first phase, he changes to his second phase, which he has two separate stat cards for what he can do on his first phase and what he can do on his second phase.
Interesting.
Let's see. So after you defeat them, you get their rune, um, which it looks like the rune for this area is known as Deathless, which is ignore the first death penalty you take when exploring a realm.
Oh, that's super helpful.
So I don't know how many runes you can have equipped at a time, but I know that once you collect a rune, it is permanently in your inventory, and you can switch
Hmm.
out the effect. And sometimes these can be passive effects, such as uh, like additional health or a um, like the one that we just did, where it was a conditional trigger.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of interesting things to be had.
Very cool. Yeah, and even then you can kind of I guess interpret even the runes as like quote unquote magic powers and stuff like that. Things that are passive that just kind of happen because I would imagine that one with ignoring the first death penalty would be pretty passive.
Yeah,
It just happens, which again is super beneficial if you don't want a clock to be ticked, if you don't want to reduce your speed, and all of that. Very, very helpful. Oh, this is so cool. I really need to get this book, and I just also found out that it has a physical copy, and now I am very tempted.
oh, it does. Oh no.
I know, yeah, I'm like, ooh, I really want it. Uh, but but you can get a digital copy. It's $15 on itch.io. Just with the amount of how many realms are there in the actual book?
Oh God. Let me pull that up right now. So there's one, two, three, four, five, six. Looks like six realms that you get.
Yeah, just like you get six different essentially realms that you can go through, which probably last a while to get through as you will die.
Yes.
You can You can design your own. There's third party content that has realms. This is absolutely There's tons of opportunities and a lot of playtime that you can spend on this game just through what's in the book itself and the unofficial not unofficial, but the third party content. Plus, the best thing about solo RPGs is the fact that, as they say, solo RPGs, you can play them alone, just by yourself. You don't need to organize groups of people to play together. You can play through kind of these predetermined type stories, but to see how you actually fare through it. Like, you are going through something that's already, it's almost like playing a video game where it's set
Yeah,
and it's already set up for you and everything is there and you are just going through it and seeing what your experience and what your adventure is going to be like, which is very, very cool.
I wholeheartedly agree that um, there's just a lot of fun to be had here. Um, y- you know, it's interesting because I can see how this game in particular, if you tweak just a few things, you could actively have more than one player. This could be
Hmm.
a multiplayer game if you just switch up a few things, like maybe change the combat arena from a 4x4 to, say, a 6x6.
Hmm.
Um, with some minor tweaks and adjustments like that, you could very easily make this more than one person. Not that I think I would really want to change it, but it's just interesting how the mechanics are set up in such a nice way that you could do solo or one other person and have it be relatively unchanged.
Yeah, and you could even play it in a way of you could play with someone else and just take like switch off. Like you can go through one area of the map. You can like I don't remember exactly what they're called, but just like the
Realms.
points, the points.
Oh, the
You
point.
can
Yeah, yeah. They're
yeah, you
literally called points.
yeah, you can go through one point and then have your friend go through the next, and then go back and forth like that, and see how the different decisions that each of you make will affect the other in the game itself as you then go through, and if you have to go back to previous points and all of that. So there's definitely a good bit of wiggle room on how you could play this game, and it does seem simple enough that you can change it and adjust some of the rules pretty easy. Which, like we said earlier, you don't have to play a game a certain way to have fun. If you want to adjust it so that you could play with another person, do it. Have fun. See what that would be like. All of that. A lot of people, especially a lot of indie RPGs, I think enjoy people messing around with their games. You know, having like their own hacks and ways that they play it. Obviously, anything if you want to publish anything, I you have to see what their rules on it is for. But if you just like in your own game with your friends and you want to figure out something to play with two people, go for it. See how it works.
Oh yeah, and so just and reading up on a little bit of the lore that I've done, I love how it's told. I love how you can learn the lore if you want to. You don't have to,
Mhm.
and everything is told exactly the way it is normally told in Souls-like, which is brief little descriptions to give you an idea of maybe what happened.
Oh, I love that so much. Because
So,
again, like just through my experience of more so roguelikes versus soul-like games, um, very similar, where you just kind of get those Dead Cells specifically, where you just get those little bits of information that describe things, and it sets up the entire vibe, the like kind of base story that you don't quite know everything about, but just enough where it's like, man, this was really interesting. This is so weird, like all of that. Oh, that's so cool.
oh, 100%. This is just this really hits those single player tabletop RPG itches if you want a nice, good um Souls like experience.
Absolutely. And I again like some of the my favorite things right now is looking into solo RPGs because especially if you have a pretty like strict schedule or you're not able to really organize games with friends because of work or things like that, solo RPGs are a good way to kind of fill that void. Like I really want to play these games, but I just can't with other people right now because of my schedule, play solo RPGs. They're not the exact same experience, but they give you a very unique and different experience just on their own. With this, it's like actually playing through a video game. There's some solo RPGs that are journaling games where you're actually like writing down the story and you're writing down what happens. I think there's some others that kind of also emulate those similar video game vibes, but in different ways. Some just bring you on a journey and story like a video game, and you just see how it ends. There's all kinds of different solo games, all kinds of different ones, and it's very, very interesting.
I absolutely love that because as somebody that does have a very busy schedule, um, and who hasn't unfortunately been able to play tabletop RPGs in a very long time, solo games and things like that are so incredibly interesting to me because this is my first exposure to it, and the fact that all you really need is a couple D6, which are very easily accessible.
Yep.
Um, I mean, realistically, you don't need the print off sheets, but if you do, you could very easily. Like, I was thinking in my head, I'm like, okay, if I really wanted to, I could just simply take a piece of paper, make a 4x4 grid with a pencil, and fill it in as needed.
Yeah, just go on your way. And everything would be like you could perfectly play it. It's so cool. Like, and the best thing as well is even if you don't have just some D6s, online dice rollers.
Yes.
Even if the games use different kinds of dice, online dice rollers are such a fantastic resource if you want to play solo RPGs. Because if you don't have the dice on you already, because you can just roll them on there and then keep track of whatever it is on in a notebook or on paper or whatever you're using to have the game run through. Another cool thing that I did see is there seems to be quite a few like actual plays of Rune itself.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I saw one briefly about a third party realm called Coral Rock, where someone does a little actual play of it and plays through it. And you could do this as well if you don't just doing like pen and paper, drawing out the maps or printing them out and all of that. Super easy. Can absolutely do that. But you can do it online as well. If you have like drawing programs and stuff like that, you can bring these sheets up and these grids up and these maps up in drawing programs and actually do it that way as well, which I think is really cool.
I wholeheartedly agree. The fact, and I think I may have watched either a similar video or the same video because that sounds very similar, but I'm going based off of just memory here for that one. um, but there's just so much little thought out mechanics that I absolutely love about this game. And like I said, exploration feels risk rewarding, combat feels very risk rewarding. It's just it emulates that good feeling of a good Souls game very, very well. Now, does it itch those same feelings of like, having like a big party of players? Well, no, but I don't think it's intended to.
Exactly. It's the kind of experience that you want to play. If you want to play a game with a full party of players and other people, then you need to find a game that'll do that for you. If you want to play something where it's just you against a ruthless world and you want the high risk, high reward, all of that, play something like this where it's just yourself and you are going against this predetermined adventure and so cool. Like I think that's a lot of things that people don't always realize is that there are so many TTRPGs out there. There are so many solo TTRPGs, so many just like full games. You can really customize your experiences with these games on what you like. If you like it, if you want the exploration of this game and you like that, then this game would probably work better than maybe a different Souls-like TTRPG that would have more of a focus on combat, stuff like that. So there's all kinds of different options out there, and you can determine what you want through what these games do and actually find the perfect game for what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Um, and the other thing that I like when I read through this is there's actually two separate sections, one for interpreting rules and one that is simply just said or stated that you will make mistakes, and it says read that again. It's going to be okay. The creator even states that he makes mistakes when he plays Rune.
Oh, I love that because that's another, and I haven't recorded it yet, but I'm wanting to do an episode soon about talking about why you should try other TTRPGs and kind of talking about the experience of learning them and stuff like that. And there is a whole section that I have that I'm going to address that's about you will make mistakes. Exactly that. You will make mistakes when you first played D&D. Like let's say D&D is your first RPG. You
Which it
made
was.
mistakes. Yeah, you made mistakes while playing that game, but you learned. And it's okay to make mistakes because that means you're going to learn and you're going to get better. And even if you know the game, even if you've read the book, you're probably going to make mistakes because you're a person. It happens. It's okay. Like, it's not the end of the world if you accidentally do the wrong modifier or anything like that, or you forget to use a ability that you have but you forgot. It happens, and it's okay because you are all learning together, or if it's a solo RPG, you are learning, and you can always apply that the next time you play. And it's like, okay, I'll make sure to remember that, and you'll just get better and better over time. And it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes.
That is absolutely correct. You know, I remember making several mistakes when I first got into D&D, and one of the nice things is that I kind of essentially taught myself how to play D&D
Mm-hmm.
through watching other people play. I kind of picked up on some of the mechanics. I went out, I did research on like, okay, how do I create a character? How do I do this? How do I do that? Um, and yet I still made made my own mistakes. So the fact that this creator went out of his way to say, "Hey, it's okay if you um, make a mistake while playing. It's okay," is just really heartwarming.
And reassuring. It's like, thanks. I appreciate it.
Um, let's see.
So cute.
Oh, you were asking about spells. I don't know if you were asking about them earlier or before we started recording, but you were asking about spells.
Uh, oh yeah, we were talking about it earlier in this.
I did actually find a spell here. It is called Erupting Flame. When you roll a 4 on your stamina die, you deal 2 harm to all in the same tile or the adjacent tile as you. If you roll a 5, it is deal 2 harm to all in your row or column. And if you roll a 6, it is deal 5 to same or adjacent enemies, take 2 harm.
Interesting.
So
Ooh.
you were asking about spells. There are spells.
Oh, cool. Yeah, those seem do they I don't know how much you are seeing on this, but do they have like they talk about is there limitations with these spells like how many times you can do it, anything like that?
Nope. I believe they function very similarly to just regular weapons. So have at it. But again, there might be that risk reward thing because not every number is represented on the die. So if you notice, with this spell, I started with 4. If
Yeah.
I roll less than a 4, the spell doesn't work.
Okay, that's really cool.
Uh,
Ooh, yeah, so you just it's super powerful, but you have to get those big numbers and you might have to risk putting all your dice into that spell instead of blocking and doing other things like that. Very cool.
so, yeah. So, like I said, this game is just all about risk reward and being very action economy cognizant.
Yeah, if you like thinking about your resources and thinking about plans and strategy and all that, I think you would really, really like this game. where you have to put the thought in.
Now, I do have one little criticism, but that is gonna probably just be due to the nature of this being a single player game, which is
Mhm.
there's not a whole lot of role play elements to this.
Yeah, and that is the one thing with solo RPGs is um I think they're some of the ones that are more journal based you can definitely get into RP with. Uh since you can write it down in a journal and kind of work it out that way. But a lot of the other ones don't really have those elements because there's not really other people. It's hard to role play with yourself. I mean, you can do it, but it can be it can be a little weird. So a lot of these solo RPGs are more so like just single player games. Almost not necessarily board games, but like journal games or emulating video games and stuff like that. So you definitely don't have the role playing part. And if you really like role play, you're not going to get that need filled with solo games. So that is one unfortunate thing.
But overall, I think, in terms of like this being a love letter to Souls games, it does it very well because that is one thing that I don't know if I'm gonna get flack for this, but Souls games don't really have a whole lot of role playing to them
Mhm.
because the story takes place around you. You are less in Souls games, you are less a character, like an individual character, and more a force of nature that is just existing. Like you
Mhm.
are more an eventuality. Like in Dark Souls, you are the chosen undead. There's so many undead that eventually one of them is going to be chosen, the
Mhm.
chosen undead. So eventually, you are just going to be the force of nature that causes massive change. And I think this game does a very similar good job of doing that.
Absolutely. Good job, game. I always think it's so fun to find games that just do exactly what you want. It's like that perfect. Because I know that we were talking about before of like hopping on a call and maybe trying to figure out some sort of like because you mentioned that it'd be really cool if there was like a Dark Souls type game. I'm like, oh yeah, that would be cool. And I wasn't really looking around on anywhere to see if there was anything. I was just thinking in general, oh yeah, that could be something. And we were gonna hop on a call at one point and just like, well, would be important mechanics and all of that. Like how would we be able to do that? And then literally yesterday I was just scrolling around on itch.io and I saw that. I'm like, oh, I think Ash would really like this. And so I sent it to you and here we are. Freaking perfect Dark Souls game and talking about it now and all of that. Absolutely fantastic.
I know, and this is all just so inspiring because we were, like I said, we were talking about like the mechanics that I would like to see in a um in a Souls like RPG, like tabletop RPG, because I don't think there's an official one, but Lord knows if they ever came out with an official tabletop RPG for a Souls like game or a Dark Souls tabletop RPG, let me tell you, it would be immensely popular because they do actually have a board game for Dark Souls, which I haven't played, but it looks very interesting.
Oh, that would be interesting. Actually, there is a Dark Souls RPG. As soon as you started to mention like a Dark Souls RPG, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm missing something. And I looked it up. There is one. However, I feel like I remember around the time it released, there wasn't a lot of good reviews of it.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, though I might be wrong. I might be wrong. Uh and I'd have to look into it more to actually see how it works, but I believe it's a bit closer to how D&D like 5th edition does its rules, I believe. But I
Oh, okay.
could be wrong. I don't know for sure, but there is a Dark Souls TTRPG. Now how it works with actually working with a group of players would be interesting. Since Dark Souls is where'd you go?
Craig.
Quick little cut apparently as the recording like just stopped. Uh but yeah, we were just talking about Dark Souls, TTRPG. Yeah, I would be curious of how it would work with an actual group of players versus just one person, because it feels like Dark Souls, part of like what makes it that is that you are just a single person. You are a single person against everything and
You're
making the
either a
change.
single person or a very small group of people.
Okay. So maybe it would work. Yeah, it works off of like D&D 5th edition
And when
rules.
I say like a small group of people, I mean like one or two additional people.
No more, no less.
Yeah, it's very limited on how many, because at a certain point, if you get like 5 players to solo a boss, like that's absolutely ridiculous.
Here, I'm gonna send you this very quick. Just out of curiosity. Just because.
Okay.
Because it looks interesting. I keep typing on my other keyboard that's connected to the wrong computer. Uh Yeah, because it seems very interesting. I might want to look into that just a little bit more, at least review wise and feedback wise, on what people actually think of it. Because I forgot that was like a whole big thing that happened last year, I think. Or I think it was close to around the time that Elden Ring came out, where this released, and it was a whole big thing and all of that. So yeah, now I'm curious. I want to look into that and kind of compare it to um obviously the Souls game that we have been talking about. Uh Here you go, that's that. Yeah, no, that's very interesting. Very interesting because I can't even believe I completely forgot about that. It's a whole RPG that's out there, and I remember a whole thing about it, and it never crossed my mind until like just a little bit ago. It's hilarious.
That is
Uh,
hilarious. I will definitely have to look into that.
yeah, very, very interesting. And I think it might be a bit more. I don't know. I have to see what it does. Like, what does the game do compared to other other games? Like, why play this over just modifying fifth edition to play Dark Souls? You know, like what is the difference that this game does bring that makes it stand out? Um, so I might look into that. Probably won't buy it, but I'll look into reviews and stuff because I don't think I'll play a Dark Souls game other than Rune because I just now really want to play Rune. Uh,
No, I'm right there with you. This
maybe
has just been so fantastic.
yes, and it would honestly, I don't know if this would be something people would be interested in, but maybe doing like a little live recording of I mean, I think this would be more of a YouTube thing maybe being able to actually record like a screen or something, but of someone playing Rune, kind of like how the actual play examples are. And I'd love to know like see your experience playing the game itself and seeing how you enjoy it actually playing through it once because obviously you haven't played it yet.
Nope, haven't
And
played it, but
uh,
definitely what I will try to look into when I have some spare time is an online version of this game, because the big thing is that obviously you have to find a virtual tabletop system that allows you to do a 4x4 grid.
mhm. Excuse me. I think you could probably do it through something like Roll20 if you really modified it. Not modified it, but you could definitely, I think, get the small enough grid and everything like that. I want to look.
Probably.
I want to now after this episode, I want to look a bit more into it and, and all of that, and see what can be done. But if you would like to say any like final thoughts or comments about the Rune game right now, please go for it.
You know, as somebody who hasn't played tabletop RPGs in quite a while, this is definitely like a perfect little thing. It was only $15, so if you're on a budget, it's not that expensive. You get a good decent amount of content, and this feels very much like you can just, unlike a full campaign or even a one shot of like D&D or something, you can just stop in the middle of combat and it's okay
Mhm.
because you're the only one playing. So it's very convenient if you're time crunched or are energy crunched or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like just play it over like if you want something to do over like your lunch break. Just like pull it out and just, go through it. See how far you get, and then once you're done and you have to go back to work or whatever, you can finish and then pick it up later. Very easy to that is another joy about these solo RPGs is you can control how much you play. It is not dependent on other people. You can control how far you go in a single play session, all of that. It's fantastic.
So yeah, that's kind of my final thoughts on it. Is this is a very like interesting little tabletop RPG that I'm so glad I got introduced to. Um, Hopefully, I can find a way to play it, and maybe do a recording for you.
Yeah,
So
that would
that
be
way we can.
really awesome.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty much all I got.
Well, I definitely again, like I said, I didn't read the book yet or anything, so I really didn't know a lot of the rules or anything before talking. But now being able to talk with you all about it, I am very excited to actually look into it. I really want to either buy the digital version or the physical version. The physical version is just too tempting for me, but we'll see how it goes. I really want to buy it and actually be able to play it because I'm always looking for I'm always looking for solo games to play, and I found a lot of journaling ones, and I felt too intimidated by those. And I'm like, I just want something that seems simple and easy, something that's pretty straightforward to play through, and Rune seems exactly what I've been looking for. Something very easy, not easy, but like something easy to get into, be able to set up all of that, no problem. So I'm definitely going to be looking into and getting this game after this because I need to play it.
Yeah.
That's just
Oh yeah.
a fact.
100%. And if you ever feel like you need to like learn, the developer I believe does have his own YouTube channel that he goes over and plays the game and shows you how to play the game. So
Yes.
if you are confused at all, um, definitely look it up. There are actual guides for this game out there, which for such a smaller RPG, I'm surprised there is.
Yeah, it's amazing. Again, this is just where like community shines. It's amazing to actually see people, have these little have actual plays and a lot of third party content, all of that. Totally amazing. And like Ash said, the creator has made actual plays of this video and guides to go through it. So if you want to learn it just through that, 100% recommend it. Actual plays are a fantastic way to get into an RPG without fully committing to it. So 10 out of 10 would recommend if you really want to look for a very fun solo Souls-like game to play.
Yeah, and the fact that surprisingly it also emphasizes exploration as much as combat is really interesting to me.
Yeah, and I appreciate that a lot because I feel like that's an element in games that kind of get left behind a little bit. Because that's a lot of games have, I shouldn't say a lot of games, there are, D&D, for example, doesn't have a lot of, it has things for exploration, but that's usually not a focus of most games. It's a lot of the abilities and things that you get are usually focused on combat. So it is very cool to see a solo RPG that encourages the exploration along with the combat and all of that. And even learning, being able to learn about the place and about the lore, very cool.
Oh yeah, I am just absolutely in love with this game.
I'm so excited to actually like look into it more and play it, and probably watch an actual play first and see how it goes. But I think that is the end of the episode, and I am just so giddy to actually try this out now. And I'm going to be as soon as this ends, I'm going to be trying to figure out if you can do it, like set something up on Roll20 to play it, but we'll see. But yeah, thank you for listening, and thank you again, Ash, for actually coming on and talking with me about this. I'm so glad that I showed it to you and that we were able to do this because this has been amazing. And I've always wanted to have you on the podcast, so this is great.
Oh, Thank you. It is absolutely a pleasure. I'm sure I will be back on at some point again because like I've said before, I absolutely love talking about tabletop RPGs and role playing and all that stuff. I could talk about it for hours and hours and hours.
Same. But yes, thank you so much for coming on, and I think we'll end it there. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the RPG Goblin. I hope that you enjoyed it, and thank you again, Ashe, for coming on and talking about Rune with me. I'm so glad that I found that game because it is so fantastic, and please again check it out at Gila RPG, who is the publisher of Rune. All of the RPG Goblin social medias are in the description below, and I will be slowly working on getting the YouTube up to start getting the episodes on YouTube itself, so wish me luck on that. The next episode will be March 10th on Friday, and we will be talking about The Quiet Year, which is such a cool game. So, see you then.